that way, I will unmute you. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna start. This is Spark Your Strengths. This is the intro class for the 21-day challenge. So we're gonna actually start at the high level. So pretend you don't even know what the strengths test is. Some of you actually don't know what it is, but some of you do. But I want you to just like clear your mind. This is how you would share about this if you're enrolling somebody into even taking the assessment. So utilize it. So begin with a beginner's mind if you need one, and also just to refresh, how do you talk about it? How do you bring people into this conversation if you've already been in here? And we're going to go ahead and get started. So strengths discovery. So the name of the assessment that I use, but all strengths assessments work with the work that we do here in Spark. Any strengths assessment would work, but we prefer Clifton Strengths because there's so many tools available and it's really accessible for people. So that's going to be the language that we're using. If you haven't taken your strengths test, I'm going to show you how to do that. So here's the premise that I'm coming in on, is that I believe we're all unique. There's data to prove that. But I also hold everyone is extremely powerful and capable of building their vision. So think about that for a moment. Do you feel powerful towards your vision? The magic of this entire strengths community is that we reflect and mirror that strength in each other. So we're actually stronger as a community than we are individually. And as a solopreneur, for many of you that are here, you are a solopreneur, you can notice that it can be pretty isolating even if you're on a team, because we're all wired so differently. So we've created a community that we can all grow together and bring our uniqueness and celebrate that. A little bit about me. My name is Kate Pintor, that's short for Caitlin. I am an Awake certified coach, which is transformational, and I do organizational development with that. Strength strategy certified, and I'm also a certified people acuity guide. So what this means in terms of the way I context the strengths language, different than somebody who was only in the Gallup Circle, which is where I started. I actually take these strengths all the way through, looking at your entire story, how those developed. We include a lot of tools on productivity and looking at the neurodiversity, so like the uniqueness of you and how you can actually operate and influence no matter what your results are. I find that when people are, initially take the test, they're like, this is how I am, and that is how other people are. So we kind of want to build containers around it as we're understanding it. We also let ourselves off the hook because we're like, this is just how I am. And my experience with this work has been actually that you can be anything. You can accomplish anything in here if you embrace the strengths that you have. So if you're comparing, thinking you would have loved discipline in your top 5, I would too. That's why I'm partnering with Mandy Lieberg. Mandy, give a wave because it's in her top 5. I don't have to have it. I can find people to support me that are going to ask those questions that I'm not necessarily wired to ask in the same way. I couldn't do what I do if I had those strengths. So we're coming more into who we are. We're embracing our uniqueness. We're embracing our unique focus needs. We embrace our productivity needs, our energy management needs, and we start exploring underneath that so we can create consistent momentum. Consistency will free you in your business building, in your team, and in your family. It builds trust and security, but we have to be intentional about that. It's not like you can just take a 10-step plan as to how to build your business and do all of those consistently, because hello, life is going to happen. It's going to happen around you, to you. There's things that you cannot control. But what you can control is making excellent choices as you have a greater awareness of yourself. You can get back up and more resilient. If you can read these little comments about other projects that I'm working on, and also not eating donuts right now, but I do love them. My grandfather was a donut breaker. That's the way to my heart, by the way. Donuts. Just to say, if you're coming out here, you can ship me some. That would also be welcome. I will take donuts for trade. I absolutely will. So here, I want to play a little game. And normally, there's like, if you can look in your box, you can see, you can raise your hand on this platform. I think if you click on the names, you may be able to see it. If that doesn't work, no worries. But this is how, if we were doing this in a group and doing it live, you'd be able to raise your hand, or you can just raise your hand visually also. So raise your hand if you can't stand to sit still during brainstorming meetings. Some of you can't stand to sit still right now because you're actually doing a million things while you're listening. And it's also because it's in the middle of the day. But yeah, if you can't stand to sit still during brainstorm meetings, like it's like people are in the idea mode and you want to like, what are we going to actually do? We want to like move it into action. That is one, that used to be me. That used to be me. Raise your hand if you always start the day by making a list. Yes. And if you work with me, you will also be making a list but we call it brain dumping. So your list can be done with magic markers. It can be done with crayons if you need it to. You can collage your list, but yes, starting the day with a list, my achiever definitely loves it. Raise your hand if you talk to strangers at the grocery store, in the airport, at the post office, the neighbors. Some of you do this all of the time. I think I observe them. I don't know that I talk to them, but my 3-year-old son, when we get to the grocery store, says to me, I'm going to talk to every single person here. Like when he gets to the grocery store at 2 years old, that's what he started telling me. Like there's all of these new people and I'm going to talk to all of them. And I can't identify with that because I have relator, he probably has woo, and evidently you're born with woo. So it's not even something I can train you in because some people are energized from meeting new people, which has been awesome. But my dad actually, we're sort of laughing because it seems like he has woo in his later life. Like, I don't know what shifted, but now he always talks to strangers. And my mom's doing this because she's like, I don't know, his personality changed. I don't know what's happening. So your strengths can evolve. Raise your hand if you seek a familiar face at a party. Group of strangers, yes. Got to find an authentic conversation before you get in there. Somebody to talk to that you know, and that helps ease the anxiety of entering in. If you're networking and you're trying to expand your business, this is one that is really good to become aware of. I have a colleague that I ride to those networking events with, because if I have authentic connection all the way there, my relator needs are met, and I feel more confident when I arrive. It's so magical. So I always know if I'm going, I got to bring somebody with me. And it's good for them because I'm bringing somebody along and stretching them in what they're doing, but it's also good for me because I'm bringing somebody that I know when there are no familiar faces. Anxiety is a real thing. All of you have it in some way. There's things that are more vulnerable for you. It's just part of the journey. Okay, let's see. Okay, crying while watching movies and TV shows. I don't know that I think any strengths could possibly cry watching movies and TV shows. But I do see my husband with number one empathy is he watches movies to allow him to feel all the feels. He loves to feel all the feels. And so I think, I'm like, you're watching chick flicks without me. This is hilarious. I think he's going to put like The Notebook on later. But it's actually magical for those of you that have it, being really present and identifying with those stories. Again, could be any strengths, but definitely high empathy. Raise your hand if you tend to be skeptical until you see the proof. Some people need the data. High deliberative, analytical, strategic. It's like, well, let's think this through. Did that really work out? Show me the data. And I'm happy to say, this is why I chose to use strengths as a language in my work, because it wasn't in there originally, because I wanted it to be data-driven. It actually has to work. If there's no impact from my work, I don't enjoy social media enough to be on here as much as I am if there's no impact. I'm on here because there is impact. So there's that place of having it be data-driven. Many of you need that in order to engage. Raise your hand if you trust your intuition. It's an interesting thing. Intuition is, you can call it all kinds of things, but like you just know in that gut, and that might be your guiding light. You could call it the Holy Spirit, the universe, something else, but that space of intuition, when you lean in and you hear it, that gut brain, you can make great, excellent choices from that. And if you don't feel it, some of you won't move. And that's a sacredness in your own journey. So here's the data. For those of you that love the data, there is no more effective way to empower people than to see each person in terms of his or her strengths. So people who know and use Clifton strengths, who use their strengths, they're 6 times as likely to be engaged at work, 7.8% more productive in their role, 3 times as likely to have an excellent quality of life, and 6 times as likely to do what they do best every day. And really, if you just get to do what you do best every day one time, which is why some of you have a side hustle and some of you have many hustles, because if you get to do it like once every day, you're raising the bar on all of it, on your well-being. Next year, 80% of people will have some type of side hustle or residual income project, according to the statistics that are out there right now. So if you don't have one, talk to me, because I can hook you up with some people. But there's this place of diversifying. If you're playing to your strengths, it's good to have a passion project. It's good to be developing people. It's good to be investing in your own growth and coming into that meeting on a daily basis. And if you know what your strengths are, you can find the match for you, find the vehicle for you that's going to work and be compatible with your other vision. That's also really important. So here's how unique you are. 1 in 278,000 have the same top 5 in random order. And as far as who has a shared, like the same top 5 in the same order, is 1 in 33.4 million. I also read a statistic that it's 1 in 12.2 trillion that would have the same top 10. So there was nobody like you. There is a website from Richard Sterrett where you can find your strengths twin. And I think I've shared with some of you that my sister entered her email to find her strengths twin, and they found it. And that person was also a health coach in Russia, but we haven't heard back from them. So we're not sure. So they're out there somewhere, also in the same career, which was awesome. You may also discover that people who share 4 out of your top 5, you may have a similar rhythm in terms of how you approach a project. But even 7 out of 10, even though you may find some synergy with them because you can predict how you work, personality, it doesn't show personality. It's not a personality assessment. So don't make assumptions about the people who have the strengths. They're the experts on those. Okay, so here's a picture of the app. So if you have a phone, I think it works on Android and iTunes, so go ahead and get it, and you can download the app, Clifton Strengths. And on that app, you'll see a little button here on the left that will show your strengths if you've taken the assessment. You can take the assessment at the GallupStrengthsCenter.com. And in that center one here, you can share your strengths with me and others and build a little community so you can check back and forth and see what's there. And the app will also give you data on each of these themes. So it's a really handy tool to have in your pocket. So the way that I use this data, so you're going to go take this test. It's going to take about 30 minutes of your time if you haven't taken the test. It's well worth it because of the connections that are possible after. And they're going to send you a bunch of things and some really beautiful reports, which are awesome. Inside of that, what I want to show you is that there are things when you get that data that we can all read. We can read the results of your top 5 when you pay that $20. So there's things that you're going to know about that, and others can see. We can all see your strengths. But the reason I use this as a language and I embody it, and I use the language and have deepened it in my teaching, is because there are things that are unknown to me about you as a coach. There are things that you're hiding from me that I don't know as your coach. So if you're a mentor, people are hiding some things from you, intentionally, unintentionally. We don't have the trust yet. And there's things that are unknown to both of us. And there's things that are blind to you about you that I may know from having 10,000 hours in this work. So I find the people who are most successful in really executing have embraced their blind spot. They're not afraid of it anymore. And they're also more willing to share some of those hidden things at the right time. They know how to set the conditions for safety for them, where they can reveal those vulnerabilities at the right time. So our communities that we build allow for that sharing. That's into the looking glass. Spark is going to help you in that known category, in that blind category. It's going to ask you some questions every day to keep your strengths top of mind and deepen your understanding of others. And it doesn't take a lot of time to do it. So I will just preface it by that. And on this journey, where does Spark fall? You'll see me use this. If you follow me at all, you'll see me using this graphic that I created. Spark is right here before this yellow space where you're determined and you want a tool. That's when you take this test. And then it builds your confidence because now you're starting to look, as you go deeper into Spark, what's right with me? What is my magic sauce? am I a unicorn too? They seem like a unicorn. They seem like they got it going on. They're confident in their leadership. You notice yourself comparing yourself to other leaders or other people in your industry, other women that are just in the same work as you, and you're in that comparing. You need to own who you are and own who you're not, and let both be okay. That's the goal. So what happens is, as you hit hurdles in your business and it's not as new, like it's great at the beginning, you're getting organized and it's new and you're fine. You can stay there and you get more tools, you download some free stuff. But then you're going to start wondering at some moment, like, do I have what it takes? And as you're working with people and you hit an obstacle with them, you're going to start wondering at times, you're going to try to solve their problems. This is what we do. I got to coach them. I got to get them motivated. And you're taking all this responsibility for somebody else's performance. This work that we do awakens everybody's responsibility for their own performance and unlocks the magic and their own momentum for each person. So you are not codepending the people that you're working with, your partners, your spouses, your downline, your colleagues, your clients. We want to move away from codependency and unlock that richness in each person by being able to identify it. As we move through after Spark, which is in this identity doubt section, then you're going to notice I need to go a little bit deeper. If you stay in Spark through day 14, 15, 16, 17, we start getting into this and raising your emotional intelligence a little bit. And then what we do in the Looking class, the Looking Glass is actually this is our 6-week group program, so it's much deeper, it's a bigger investment, but we start transforming ourselves and owning our identities and our stories and really digging into that deep stuff, like the origin story of your strengths, how to recover from your triggers. That's the Looking Glass. Spark is going to help identify that, but it's sort of like this, like you're kind of dating and you're courting a little bit, getting to know yourself, keeping it top of mind, just so you know how those programs work. And you can ask me more questions later. The goal being in this whole process, I know who I am, I know who I'm not, and both are okay. When you come into that leveled energy and start understanding the needs of your strengths, you're going to find yourself having some more momentum, getting up quicker. Okay, this is the hallmark of this work right here. Everybody, as they're approaching their strengths, the first conversation when you see them, whether it's like, well, I don't know if that's correct. Some of you that have high input, analytical, might wonder about the actual data that you got back. Like, I don't know if that's me. It might be me. Some of you, when you take the test, you're like, I wish so-and-so could see this, could see me like this. Some of you are feeling that. Some of you are also going, oh my word, there's too many words here. Like, I don't know if I can understand the language. Some of you maybe, you type in the comments in the chat box if you had a different experience even than that. Type, what were your first thoughts when you took the test, for those of you that saw it? Some of you get really super excited. Some of you think it's too hard. Some of you feel seen for the first time. Some of you are trying to figure out, now what? Now what do I do with this? What's the point of taking it? And all of that is okay. But inside of all of us, there is confidence and vulnerability. This is how you create authenticity, if you want to be an authentic business owner, an authentic leader. And there are levels of vulnerability that are different depending on your strength set. We all have different vulnerabilities. There are people who have a real fear of failure. There are people who have a real fear of being alone. Not that those two are separate, but there are real triggers, and the people that you're working with have different triggers in the business based on their fears, the needs of those strengths that they have. Their vulnerabilities are different. And the confidence, the conditions for your confidence, to set yourself up for confidence, the way that you operate and produce and keep your word to yourself, and the way that you function, the way you organize your day, that is different than the person sitting beside you. So we want to understand how the strengths correlate into that confidence, and understand so that you know what those strengths need in order for you to have that. And then you stop judging your vulnerability, because you are awesome and not awesome, right? We all have this awesomeness of the strengths. They also have an overuse pattern. When I'm not grounded, there's an overuse pattern where we are less effective, or we have you get certain feedback when you're in that zone. Maybe someone thinks you're busy. Maybe sometimes you blurt out things that you don't mean to blurt. Maybe you have too much candor at times. Maybe people think you're too sensitive, or maybe people think you have too many ideas and you're not really, can't see how you're actually executing them, or they don't value your ideas. There's those types of disconnects in relationship. Can make that better by looking at it here. And then you get to sort of volume control your strengths and create the impact that you want to have. That's one of the outcomes of this work. So your strengths lens is actually how you view the world. So like Kim has certain strengths, Mary, Christy, Carrie Ann, we all have a different strengths lens. So I'm viewing it through mine and you're viewing it through yours. And we all view, even if I had a big, huge beach ball in here and it's so huge it goes to the sky. And all the way in Iowa, they say, oh, it's a total red beach ball. And down in Georgia, they're like, it's blue. And in California, they're saying yellow. And we're all absolutely correct because we can only see what we see in front of us. But the story we've been telling ourselves is what we see. We believe everything we see. Perception is reality. And so most people that you're going to partner with, that you're working with, are only seeing what they see and they think this is all there is. So there can be competition in that. There can be a need to be right. I need to look good in that. And then when they find out there's more than what they saw, it feels destabilizing. It feels a little bit like, oh, remember some of you that have had that, you have that first wake up to your blind spot and you're like, oh, not everyone perceives me as this thing that I want to be seen as. So the strengths lens helps us to have those conversations because you hold yourself more lightly. You are less ego-centered as you do that work. So Spark can really help you to embrace your strengths lens and see the lens of others so you don't take it so personally when they have a different experience or they have a different idea. Because you're starting to view them from a 30,000 foot level and you're not like right here reacting all the time. You're like, oh, okay. They're viewing it like that. I'm curious about that. What's going on with how they're viewing this? And your listening goes up. It's amazing. And here's what your strengths, so there's 34 themes. Your bottom 5 are your blind spot. 16 through 21 are outside of the resource, but maybe not as blind. Like the blind spot is like, how do people even function like that? The people that have in the bottom 5, you're not even going to ask the same questions necessarily that they would ask when you're working on it. You may have a hard time connecting with people who have a lot of themes in your bottom 10. 11 through 15, those are still available. Those you have to resource by intention. So it's not your autopilot, but you're like, oh yeah, wait a minute, that's in the pantry. I can get that out. I do have that one. But if you're intentional. 6 through 10, to me is how we create balance. When I start talking about my 6 through 10, I'm grounding myself because my top 5 is just how I am every day. It's my autopilot. I sleep, whatever. It's just all there. If I'm not grounded and I'm not intentional about the impact I want to create, and I'm not checking in with my people, my autopilot can take me off course. I may be more reactive in that. So when you're utilizing and you're figuring out how to wire yourself and what you need, doing the volume control on your dashboard of your life, you can actually create the impact that you want to have. And you can measure if it's lining up or not and then adjust yourself. That volume control we call self-organization. It's your ability to manage yourself and organize your emotions, your thoughts, your actions. And it is a skill that great leaders have to learn. All of the themes are in these 4 categories. Oftentimes when I show this slide, people start making assumptions. A lot of entrepreneurs have great strategic thinking and relationship building. I see those dominantly. And the people that I'm executing I don't know, probably in what I attract, people love my executing themes. So there are fewer executors sometimes in the work because they don't necessarily need me to hold and produce their work until they're ready to develop their relationship. They need something different because they set the expectations. They actually set the goal if they have executing themes, and they can work in a disciplined way at times, not all the time, but they can. But the needs of executing are different. So they need to know what the steps are, and they need affirmation that they're on the right track, because otherwise they get it triggered and it's tough for them. to necessarily, they may not be able necessarily to express what they need unless they've developed their emotional intelligence, but they have expectations about how things should be. Influencers. Influencing energy is a little higher energy. I always look at it as forward motion, like it's energy that's going out. That's why we call it influencing. And so they take charge, they speak up, they make sure the team is heard. So when it's operating in its beauty, you're going to feel motion. But if you're going to enroll people that have influencing, then you need to tie this work to the bigger picture and their personal goal in order for them to stay engaged in it. So the strength stuff is better out loud, giving feedback to each other, talking about blind spots and polarities. The influencers need that. Now here's a lie I want you to break up with. If you do not have influencing strengths in terms of this assessment, this does not mean you don't influence. You do. It just means these particular strengths are not as high up for you. You influence with the order you create, perhaps, with the ideas you have, with the feelings that you express, with the trust that you build and the way that you build it. Doesn't mean that you don't influence. It just means that you may not have the same needs as others. So it's just make sure you're not making things up about these categories. These are not like 4 boxes to put yourself in. It's not going to work. Relationship builders. Relationship builders, they build strong relationships. And if you want to build and you find yourself high in this blue category, you're going to need people around you for accountability because you're going to enjoy it more. You need to enjoy the work more. The container, the vibe, and the group matters in order to keep relationship builders engaged and executing. It's a huge component of this work. Relationship builders can, on your team, like you can develop a nurture sequence with them. The touch points may be a little bit differently, and they need to be invited. They need to be invited. They need authenticity. They're sniffing out authenticity, especially if they have high relator. They're like checking in, that BS meter, do I believe that person? Do I not believe them? And even in here, there's some polarities, like woo and relator could be a polarity, meaning that people who are great with small talk versus people who need deep conversation. That like our preferences are inside of there. And so embracing that and learning how to enroll relationship builders. And if you are one and you're building a business, you need to learn what kind of mastermind that you need to be in. And we're taking applications because I'm matchmaking people to work together. So we find that those types of teams, it might not be the team that you're on helps you function the most, but there might be some other people that you could work with that would really help create that container for productivity for you. And noticing also what gets you off track in each of these categories. That's also really, really important. Strategic thinkers, they definitely help teams consider what could be. They absorb and analyze information to make better decisions. But they also need to hold some of the steps. Like they need to know where it's going. They want to be the map makers at times if they have high strategic. There needs to be a verbal back and forth about some of these concepts. There needs to be like group discussion around it. That's why I do, so we designed Spark to cover the needs of all 4 of these domains very intentionally. So there's Facebook Lives to keep energy up. There's group coaching to build relationship. There's group engagement. And we have a few mentors to help fill in the gaps for those of you that aren't going to be able to reach out for coaching with me. So we've covered the basis in terms of what will make it successful for you to understand who you are through this. Also through the strategic thinking, they may need to unplug and go do some thinking. So they may not want to engage in the group every day on Facebook. You think they're not there engaging, they might not be here, when the reality is they're journaling, they're at the ocean, they're like solving world problems, they're philosophizing, and so they have different needs into that space. So hugely important to get to the heart of those strengths needs. When I do a team grid, this is a sample of one for those of you that do have teams. And there's a whole class and a video on my YouTube channel that shows you how to make this. It's complex. I'm working with somebody to redevelop a new tool because this is complex. For a few $100s, you can get one, a program that does it. But your team would have to be relatively large to make it worth that investment. This one here, it just really helps to be able to see people's top 10 at first glance. And after 10,000 hours, some people just send me this grid or have me make their grid, and I just say what I notice about this. Like in here, the dominant category is executing. This is a group of human resource professionals. And naturally, they're great executors. There was a lot of activator. Look at that. Activator is a huge category. I'm noticing a lot of high self-assurance. They're in a leadership role, and they've learned not to take some things personally, which is very rare to have it. And these are not all at the same company, but they're in a networking group together. So they enjoy talking about human resources in this particular capacity, and they had some similarities of needs. So they designed this all together. But I noticed, like, in that connectedness, so you look at a team grid like this, one of the people was 21, the others have it in their top 10. So the way that they get grounded and centered might look different. It might look different. So it's good for them to partner with somebody who's different than them, to have other perspective. Individualization, another one I'm noticing in the relationship category. I know from look at that high relator, they all share that as well as that self-assurance. So these are deep, trusted relationships. They were able to find a group together, they're masterminding together and building deep trust and able to really take themselves on, which is great. But notice the lowest category here is strategic thinking. They aren't the strategic thinkers at their companies, respectively. That's not the role that they have. They're very people-oriented, and they have really fast-paced jobs. So there is some strategic thinking here, but there isn't, like, look how low input is, for instance, which was surprising to me. But input and intellection aren't there. So in terms of what their needs are in even sharing the strengths work, our work that I did with this particular mastermind was helping them. I held all that data for them. I held the strategic and the input. I maintained that resource for them and helped coach them to create and make that resource available for their teams, because it wasn't intuitive for them to know how to organize the strength stuff with their team. That just gives you an example of a higher level way of using this. And, but it's great when you can appreciate what's working in a group like this. It's pretty powerful. So that's what a sample mastermind might look like. So the goal of Spark is to keep your strengths top of mind. I want them out in your view. And your team, do you know if you're working with anybody at all, do you have their strengths out so that visually it anchors you into having better conversations and opens your listening, because it's going to require you to have great listening skills if you're going to do any work at all. It will require you to improve your listening and really get to know each other. So there's less misunderstanding. The next goal of Spark is to identify the voices in your head, because your head is the barrier to everything that you do. So we want to identify them and turn them into an all-star team. So you're not holding yourself back or stopping yourself from creating what it is that you want to have, because that will happen. I don't know how many of you remember Taming the Gremlins. I think it was a book from the 80s, but I loved that book when I was doing my personal development in the 90s, because it characterized and personified each of these potential gremlins or inner critics, different ways that were unhealthy. And so I utilize with my strengths, we actually create a board of directors together in that group, and we share, like, this is what my board of directors looks like. And it's hilarious. I can actually show you a sample later, but it's a wonderful activity, and it takes a little bit of thought, but if you spend the time to identify, what does this sound like in my head? What are these advising me? Who's sitting at my table? Am I using all of them? Am I always in my top 5? Because I'm not even aware that I have all of this nuance within me to solve my own problems and execute my own business, or run my family, or connect, or create connection. Having this data can really, really help raise your awareness. And I want you to discover the ideal conditions for your own consistency. Again, this is that neurodiversity piece. Every single person is different. You have a different chemical makeup. You have a different trauma story. You have a different needs, different ways of focusing. And there are hacks that you can learn. Like for a ranger, clearing out your physical space before you focus. I always arrange something in my purview before I sit down. Every single time. And there's something kinetic for me of, like, I'm moving this coffee cup and I'm feeling it. And I'm putting it over there. And I'm releasing and offloading energy when I do that. I'm offloading energy that's in the way of my focus by shifting my physical environment. Now that could work with any human being, but as my arranger, I found that that worked really, really well for me. Other strengths have other hacks. And you know how we get those hacks? Because we talk about it. So you're going to share your hacks for what's working for you as you contribute to the community. And when I say not theirs, yours first, your first assignment is you before we even get into the other people. I want you to start with you, your focus needs, your space, because other people are doing it. They're doing it. You may be admiring somebody that appears to be having consistency, and things are moving for them. And you're making up in your head, you have to do it the way that they did it. Even your business model needs to be designed around the strengths you have. That means which social platforms you're using, how you organize your groups, how you develop your own community, if that's what you're doing. It has to be in alignment with your strengths, not mine, yours. So there's ways to figure that out and how to partner and make sure all of the environments that you're working in fit you and also leave room for others to play. Also important. And lastly, we want to build our character. I used to resent that word. I'm like, oh, build my character. That sounds hard. Like, is my character not good enough? But this is just life. If you're going to build your business, you are going to build your character because life will do it to you. And it's going to show up. And for you to keep the resilience growing and move and get up faster, it requires character development. You're going to have to look at how you judge people and how you prefer others to show up. And you're going to have to learn how to reconcile when you miss the mark. It's just going to be part of that process if you're going to be successful at it. And it's worth it. It's totally worth it. We will also begin talking about the optimal zone. That means that sweet spot, highest energy for you, highest level of performance, and the accelerators of that for you personally. Some of this we do in the one-to-one coaching, but you knowing what your sweet spot is, doing that every day and arranging your day around that, that's hugely important. And who's driving your bus? If the voices in your head are always talking about before, or like you're stopping yourself because you're believing things to be a certain way based on past evidence. Fear will do that to you. Like, well, I can't network in that arena because X, Y, and Z happened, and that lady's going to be there, and she doesn't like me, or she didn't want me here last time, or I'm just a little weirder than they are, so I don't fit in there. All of those stories that you have that are built on the past, when that's what your board of directors is serving up, you have to figure out which of your strengths is in the driver's seat when that conversation hits. And we want to keep that needle moving. We do want some context from the past, but we want to make sure that we're not moving forward with past data. We want to be in the now, in the present. We want to be in the future too. And like, well, what do I want that network meeting to be like? And when you know your strengths, you can volume control. You just put somebody else in the driver's seat. If context is in the driver's seat and it can't stop talking about that last time you got hurt, context and empathy in the front, then maybe you need to put harmony in the front seat. Maybe you need to put positivity in the shotgun today and try and go again. So this is how specific we are about this self-organizing because it works. Now, is this the process that everybody does? No, this is my process because this is what has made my clients so successful. So I'm sticking with it because they're all moving on and doing amazing things. So you may find other ways to use the strengths. You don't have to do all of these little pieces to it, but this is how I teach it because it's so effective. It's so effective. Okay. We also will bring in some strength strategy stuff if you decide to do some one-to-one coaching, which is really designing those alliances. That takes one-to-one coaching, but there's this place of having better conversations with the data. What do you think I should know about my strengths and how they show up? What would you want to see differently in the future? Like these are, can you imagine sitting down with your boss or your partner, your team, and understanding how to answer that question about them? And being willing for someone to ask you that question and ask you what you think? That could be amazing. That could really move the needle for you in terms of the trust that's developing. And especially if you're coming in with an open mind and want to increase your impact. Again, this is only applicable when you are all in for your vision. If you're not all in for your vision, this will seem like a great skills training, but you're not going to complete the course because you're not all in for your vision. If your vision's a hobby, you're going to make it to day 7, which is not a problem. You can come in and only do day 7. But if you are all in for your business and you take advantage and you choose to engage, because participation equals value, we can go as deep as you need to go in that time and really start equipping you to be able to do this on your own and with others. That's the beauty of it. And again, if you like, if this page is resonating in this board of directors and that internal organization is really resonating with you, then message me, because the Looking Glass starts on Sunday and you want to be in this last group. It's the last one I'm personally teaching this year. So you want to be in that group if you want to go deeper than this, the top level. I'm going to invite you to message me if you want to chat with me for 15 minutes if we haven't done that before. And if you go to calendly.com, Kate Pintor, and actually I think you need to /VIP15, VIP15 at the end of Kate Pintor, /VIP15. And the challenge begins August 5th. So you have a couple weeks, to get ready. I'm going to show you, this is the link. It's only $29.99, like literally $30. The strengths test is $20 for your top 5, but it's on sale still for the full 34. So I would do all of it if you can. And you can copy this link. And then the other way you can do it, so let me take you to my Chrome here. If you go to katepintor.com, and you'll see my beautiful website, and you scroll down, you can, under self-guided work right here, you can just click on Spark, and here you go. And there's a little more detail all about it, and then you click join, and that's it right there. That will let you in, that will give you the Kajabi, and we'll be running it, and it'll give you a link for the Facebook group where we will be doing all of the actual activity. That's how that works. And just to share with you the Looking Glass page, let's try that too. And I am offering it without the one-to-one coaching as well right now. So it's 5 payments of $225. So it's $1,000 without the one-to-one coaching. And actually, let's see if I went too far here. And this is really about you becoming the most authentic version of you. So there's 6 live group classes beginning this Sunday. And it's a brilliant community. We have 90 people that have participated, and there's a lot of people opening coaching practices from this. It's been really, really beautiful. You're going to see some testimonies there. And it's normally $3,000, and it comes with one-to-one coaching, but you can do it with just the group and utilize other mentors for only $1,000. So it's, unless you want the one-to-one coaching, then you can reach out to me. So it's 5 payments of $225 instead of 6 payments of $499. But you have to message me to get that inside of that. I'm enrolling those people personally. And this will be, a higher level version of this. And you can do Spark at the same time. If you do the Looking Glass, you get Spark for free. So let's go ahead and take some questions. Any questions about, like, I can tell you, as much as you want to know about it, or if you want to talk about your strengths, we can talk about that. Any thoughts? Raise your hand and I can unmute you. And if there are no thoughts, that's okay too. Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I hope that you can join us. It's going to be an incredible, what a cutie. It's going to be an incredible journey together. And one thing I'm most excited about in this range of it is we're at this space, even in my own journey. You can see my background has shifted. When I started my strengths test in 2007, I was in a wheelchair living at the highest pain of the McGill Index with reflex sympathetic dystrophy. So like my confidence in this work, and the reason that I can confidently show up in the visibility, because I am also well supported, it's because I actually utilized this process to move from wheelchair into my dream house. In a relatively short period of time, I got out of my infusions 5 years ago. So I know that this process works when it's the right fit, and we engage and we can customize those pieces that you need. I know that this process does work because it actually happened. It's not something that I read in a book. It's not something I did in my brain. It's actually, we have a whole like vault of resources and a community around these incredible conversations. And I've built a community that still hangs out even when programs are done. Because we're developing an ability to be in relationship with each other in a different way, which again removes our head as the barrier to the work, because people are not as complicated. We get people. We're looking for what's working in them. We're not holding ourselves back in that space. We're judging ourselves less. We're embracing who we are and what we need. We're learning what we need for the first time, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't even know I needed that. And so this is just a fast track to get there. So I wanted just to reinforce that context of this, and why we have such an 80% of completion rate with our programs rather than 20% like the rest of the industry. Like, none of my colleagues can get the outcome that we've been able to have. They just don't know they're not sure why, but they aren't able to sell their programs in that space and keep people to the end, and engaged and enrolling other people into it, because it works and we're connecting to each other on new ways. And that's because of all of you. It's because of who you are and how you've activated it. And so I just set the space. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.